I think we will make a start. Otherwise, we will have to make a finish before we make a start. And that's not the best way to start an afternoon. I hope you are all enjoying very much the forum so far. It has been fantastic to hear Mayor Sobyanin talking about the future of Moscow. And the plenary session this morning was very interesting to see Moscow in the context of other large megalopolis, Tokyo, São Paulo, London. Very interesting. My name is Brian Evans. I'm an urbanist, landscape architect. Welcome to this session, The Ecology of the Megacity, Transition to Integrated Strategies. I hope this will translate well into Russian. I have had the good fortune to come to Moscow for 10 years now. And when I came for the first time, of course, I made some research. And I found Russian artists because I wanted to talk some 10 years ago about the landscape of Moscow, of the Moscow River. And I found Savrasov, The Rook's Return, which seems to be a painting that touches on the Russian soul, the change of the season. I found Ivan Shishkin, who can paint the taiga like no other artist. And my own favorite, Itzhak Levitan, who can paint. Do you know how hard it is to paint footsteps in the snow? But his painting, Evening Bells, shows the Russian church in the forest beside the lake with the light, and it's such a wonderful painting. They are in the Tretyakov Gallery, and for those of you who have not been to see them, I suggest you must go. Their representation of the Russian landscape resonates today. Their sensitivity, understanding of the taiga, the boreal forest that is the cloak that surrounds Moscow, creates the oxygen for the environment. And I suppose I look on these guys as the first Russian ecologists. They were the ones who communicated to us and still communicate to us these qualities. Although the forest, of course, is so important, Moscow is a city in a forest, bring the forest into the city. At the end of the day, actually this is what is important from ecology. If this is not clean, the city dies. If it is clean, the city flourishes. Cities today are retrofitting themselves for the 21st century. This is true of cities like London, for example, Paris, and it's also true for Moscow. But other cities in the world are growing very much, São Paulo, Shanghai, and this is true of Moscow also. So Moscow has the twin challenge to retrofit for the 21st century with all of the technologies, the transportation that's necessary, and it also has the challenge to grow. We have 3 great keynote speakers this afternoon and 6 panelists, if they all come. I don't know where they all are, but we were sending out a search party right now. We don't have long, and I know these keynote speakers. They are fantastic guys, and they will speak for their allotted time. They will be reminded close when their allotted time is complete. And if they don't stop talking, we'll switch off the microphone. The panelists will speak for a couple of minutes, about 3 or 4 key points to really make some key things. And now, if I may, let me introduce our keynote speakers. We have Wolfgang Taubner from the International Council for Local and Environmental Initiatives. He's Director for Europe and Managing Director of the Secretariat. For 20 years, Wolfgang has been working with local initiatives in environment, waste, community, in 100 European projects or more. He likes Scotland and golf, and for this I like him very much. And he is concerned with governance. Martin Powell heads up urban development within Siemens Global Cities Initiative. He works with cities leadership, building on his time as an advisor to the Mayor of London on environment. Before that, he headed up a very successful economics practice, and he worked with leading cities, which was chaired by former Mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg. But first, from Moscow, your own Anton Kolbachevsky. Anton has had a career in government and in business, and it's very interesting for me. He has dealt with structural economic issues, but he has also dealt with federal government programs for the natural resources in Russia. Now he is head of the Moscow Department for Environmental Management and Environmental Protection. He speaks and promotes these ideas widely. And for me, he brought the great Jan Gehl to Moscow to begin to think about the dialogue about public space, and for this I thank him. Anton, would you give us your paper, please?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Moscow. In my opinion, it's a very useful event. This is our third urban forum, and in our opinion, in my opinion, according to the results of the previous years, Moscow and Moscow urban planners, they did a lot and they learned their lessons. They had some exchange of international practices. And we did need that, and we do need that. We are changing. The city is changing. The city is getting more beautiful, and some positive progress has been made in the area of environmental policy. Today, I'm going to introduce to you our new ecological policy, or call it the MAP. In the 20th of the previous century, they had the new economic policy, NEP in Russian. And this is going to be a new ecology policy, another NEP in the Russian history, NEP. And the president who declared the year of 2013, the year of environmental protection, and Mr. Sobyanin also set the task for us to reformat certain ecological aspects and areas of our work. This has to do primarily with those changes that are happening in the society and in Moscow. The ecological doctrine was developed. It was approved in the early 2000s. Now, more than 10 years later, it is outdated, and we following the instructions from Mayor Sobyanin and in cooperation with academia and the local governance bodies and simple citizens, we discussed these aspects of this new ecological policy to approve the new strategy in February, aimed until 2025. Let me make a lyrical digression. Yesterday we thought it was progress when the core of any development was just economy. That time is over, and Mr. Sobyanin indicated the main idea that Moscow is the post-industrial city, and I think in the future it's going to preserve its function of education and cultural center. But a city is no longer just industrial center or a transportation hub. That is in the past. And there's no doubt that for post-industrial city lacking its own industrial production, we have as a focus its social component, its livability. And the role of the population is not just the labor force in economics. The social factor begins to influence the way of developing the city. We need the consensus with the citizens on all the important issues, and we had these recent elections, premature elections in 2013. During the political debates, different ecological programs were mentioned and promises were given, but as time has shown, this entire process, due to its political nature, was far from reality, and many real projects like planting of trees on Tverskaya Street were almost frozen because they were discussed from the political point of view. In my opinion, politics is not always helpful in ecology, and through voting you cannot always define what is beautiful or what is not, what is hazardous for one's health and what is not. Now let's talk about synthesis of ecology and economics in this new ecological policy. Now we need to use the regulatory ability of market economy and competition as the main regulating mechanism of the market. The same way is offered to us by global practice. As we use this idea of economy, we get back to it in this new format. It's economy plus ecology. This is the combination which can have the main core of the ecological policy of the town, and we cannot counterpose these two E's, ecology and economy. Let's try to look at an example of, as if it's taken from a school textbook, a square meter of territory in Moscow can cost a lot, and the demand keeps growing. If you have the demand, the supply will follow, and the demand is dictated not by the simple city development logic, or like the necessity for residential areas and offices. Moscow real estate is used as a financial tool, as a mid-term and long-term investment. Ecologists alarm about this financial pressure, and this investment kind of residential buildings can go to some natural zones, and that's bad. That's one example. One economy is against ecology. This textbook solution might be simple. You need to be able to try to capitalize on that using the natural resources, but school textbooks and life are different things. But as far as I know, there were no systemic research about the dependency of price for apartments on the greenery around it. They were not made, but we know the shrinking cities, and the financial pressure will stay, and here the ecologists will have to learn some economics, which I quite welcome, and I have to become one, and I recommend other environmentalists to become ones. And now we have to be looking at the following problem. Our position and our department's position is the broad dialogue aimed at the result, increasing the comfort of living in a city. We are not interested in the position when people keep criticizing but don't offer anything in return. At the same time, we are expecting some good proposals from everyone in Moscow. And as we deal with that, we have to come up with that. And ecology is no longer about birds and insects, and this understanding reflects one of the most ideas here. And now we're trying to remove nature to the city, and in most cases it's not just it's also pragmatic. And in where you plant greenery, the cost of square meter of residential area is much higher than in the neighboring areas. And the new ecological policy is not just something unexpected. We want to take into consideration all the best practices and recommendations of experts, but our main result is that we really do need the solution. And as we take the global experience, there are many examples that are given as that are provided. Let's not break this tradition of how it works in other countries. And first of all, the American ecologists had their experience in September of this year. The governor of state of New York, Andrew Coleman, declared about the creation of the bank that's going to issue loans to projects involved in green energy. This is called Green Bank. And bravo to our colleagues. Their charter capital of the Green Bank was 1 billion of green paper money, and Green Bank with green money, and this was a serious limit in the state of New York. Congratulations to them. And it is believed that in the next 10 years its charter capital is going to grow to $8 billion. There's a special department of the state that's going to manage that bank, and they have ecologists there who specialize in different energy projects. We can only dream about such financing, $8 billion, but Moscow residents have their own pride, and Moscow can also spend some significant money to preserve nature directly and indirectly. These are not just words. I am responsible for my words. Here, for ecology, we spend 1/3 of the Moscow budget, and that's about 500 billion rubles, and altogether, including transport and city economy. So if we take 1/3 of that, that's quite a lot. And of course, we are ready to some separate collection of waste, and perhaps even tomorrow there will be a line of people trying to get waste from us because it's so profitable industrially. Science, innovations, but most importantly, ecology. Let's talk about the organization of this space in the city. My friend and partner, working on Moscow, philosopher Jan Gale, who is going to arrive tomorrow. And now we need to combine the city into this situation, and we need to come up with a puzzle, combining it all together. And at first, this offer, I didn't like that offer. And for my emotions to come down, I needed 6 months. My second conversation was about transforming that city environment into a space and where people want to live, and all city planners and urbans and architects. And here, the real city should be safe, attractive, sustainable, and healthy. And this is not a declaration. This is economy. I like this example of a street in Copenhagen, in this multinational district with mostly Arab and Turkish, Pakistani, Somalian, Albanian communities filled with cars, and they had some scandalous reputation. Jan Gale was able to implement a totally new potential. He offered to turn the street into a bicycle-based street with recreational zones. And today, this is the landmark of Copenhagen, but of course not here in Moscow. Our district of Birylova still is looking for their solutions. Ecology is not, of course, the direct way of dealing with social tension, but why not as one of the measures? And of course, when we look at the city landscape from our windows of our cars or our home, that's against human nature.
I would like to show a few research results. We had an action photo from the window, and more than 1,000 pictures of the city were sent to us, taken from different windows and from the aircraft. And we didn't have a feeling of a whole when I looked at all these pictures. A feeling of the whole could appear only when you look at the city from inside. So in such a megapolis as Moscow, we should certainly discuss the transportation problem and just traffic. So it's so awful. So now car owners are representatives of different layers of the society, and during the action, a day without a car, we get more than dozens and thousands of participants. So the personal car brought a lot of environmental issues to the city, and due to by different assessments, so 1/3 of the car fleet of the country has been concentrated in Moscow, and Moscow is one of the first cities in Russia who started to use Euro 4 standards for gas. And certainly we still have the issues with heavy traffic, with emissions, exhausts, and it is quite evident that we need to minimize the transport in the city, but we still need it, and because we shouldn't limit the individual space of our residents. So, and one of the attempts how to address it, we should just give another thought to it. So Boris Mirkin and my colleague think that the main purpose of the environmental conditions deterioration aeration of the city are cars, and the exhausts contain more than 200 hazardous substances, and they are also full of rubber dust, and it is a great and tires are good absorbents for different hazardous substances, including cancerogens, and so this is the main module for sustainability of the environmental systems, and so how to combat this issue. So we propose that we couldn't just get rid of cars in our streets, let them be hybrid cars, and the results was the following: the number of gas filling stations for hybrid fuel reached 40. So this is the situation only for Moscow. Now it's a different situation outside of Moscow. So then the electromobiles are also just quite abundant in Moscow streets. But you know that the feeling of just a lack of protection certainly is one of the limitations for using an electromobile or hybrid car in our streets. So as regards the limitations for the transportation of people and cargoes needs a realistic approach. So there are quite a lot of students' research papers which were received at the competition, which was organized by the Moscow government in the context of environment. And a few words about energy-saving technologies in our cities. So one of the actions were supported personally by the President Vladimir Putin, and from the panoramic, from the site of the panoramic view from the Воробьёвы Горы, you could see the overall Moscow, and you could see the hot points in the city. We have the highest points for energy saving in Russia. It is a leader for implementing of energy saving technologies and use the most advanced energy saving technologies. And there is a pilot project that will be implemented. It's the illumination of park areas using diode lamps, diode-based lamps. So we also commissioned energy saving power plants in Altufia and Moscow, and we also think that the main hub for the implementation of energy-saving technologies will be New Moscow. So there is just a possibility to enhance wind and solar technologies, and so there's also in place a great system for the utilization of waste in Moscow, which also can be a good source of energy. So greenhouses, so there will be passive and active types, so also implemented, and thus we will receive less losses of heat. And so these greenhouses also provide 60-70% better conditions for human health, and so that at high productivity of labor and more comfort for residents. So the 100 watts, that was our limit for losses, and now we just reduced it twofold, and in greenhouses threefold. So the problems with regards heat supply plus the exhausts just creates a kind of a heat or thermal island of Moscow, and we have a lot of pipes and heat communication. So so the smoke is also a part of the Moscow landscape. Another thing is the electrical heat supply, and so it is not realistic today, but we are talking about tomorrow, about the future. A few words about such aspects as the green roofs. That this project will be also implemented in New Moscow and in Old Moscow, and it's just the use of new materials and some new steel materials to avoid leakages. So, and these are the green technologies that have been implemented in Moscow. So we saw a lot of challenges in this way. So who will operate, this, green roof. So it is not impossible to just give it to an investor as an individual, just object of ownership. We don't have any approaches for that, and we're trying to develop a special model for the interaction in this area. Well, I'm limited in time, but just I would like to say a few words about the main concepts of our new environmental policy of this in the city. So first of all, we need to bring the city back to a human. There should be a competition between just different districts, boroughs of Moscow. This is a world trend today, and just different cities in the world compete for the best conditions of life and the comfort of life, and they are very attractive for tourists, and different international conferences are held there. So, and all pictures of Moscow show that the city used to be much more green in the past. Trees should be more visible in the city, even just to decorate some spaces in Moscow. So we're trying to implement a program, 1 million of trees in Moscow. That's not the only, the single action. There are also very few actions regarding the shutdown of the Moscow oil refining company. So we also set up the journal Ecogrid or Eco City. We have a priority programs for the implementing of green technologies, with creating conditions for healthy lifestyles and environmental viewpoints. And we started a work together with the Moscow government in the area of waste collection, separation, and recycling. So, and the most important thing, this is sustainable development. Russian classical environmentalists and biologists use this concept, and it includes the main cost factor into the just direct competence of the environmental science. Environmental science are not just butterflies, but what is it today? It is a post-industrial reality which will come after, the machine industry period, and this city is not an exception for this. After a barbaric attack on nature, we are becoming more sober as regards that we try to plant more trees in the city, to create new organic and inorganic materials and structures. We also rethink the understanding of resources. Resources have become more competitive due to new technologies. We try to be united with nature, not to conflict with it. So we can single out 6 modules of the megapolis: municipal transport, municipal waste, energy saving, greenery, and housing. And so these are, in brief, the main important aspects that will be reflected in our new environmental policy, which is being developed currently. And naturally, our international colleagues, I don't think we'll see anything new in it, but for our city, it's a novelty. And I hope that we will see our real model, and we'll move forward, and we'll be progressing for the better, and the city will become more beautiful. Thank you.
Anton, your reputation for enthusiasm precedes you, and you have done so well to squeeze 10 litres into a 1-litre bottle. Thank you very much indeed. And for your championing of human ecology, which I think gets forgotten on occasions. Let's move on. Martin, if you would be kind enough to speak. And yes, the slide changer is coming your way. Thank you very much indeed, Martin.
Добрый день, я люблю Москву.
I love Moscow. Good afternoon, everybody.
So the slides, there we go, great. You can follow me on Twitter, MartinPowell14. To talk about megacities and the environment, I'd like to tell a story from the past. So this is Pope Sixtus VI, Roman Pope, who placed 6 obelisks into Rome, okay? And this is Rome today, so perfectly built on this vision. And London, after the Great Fire, had exactly the same plan, but this is what London built. So completely chaotic, completely different, and didn't follow the plan. And the moral here is that all cities are different, and all cities need to find their own set of obelisks in order to succeed. The experience that I have from working with the Mayor of London is in all of the policies actually that Anton has talked about. And I want to tell a story of how this comes together in the big mega cities across the world, because we're seeing lots of new trends. Poverty, terrorism, urban unrest and flooding are increasing in every megacity in the world without exception. So this is a guaranteed trend. And if you just look at Jakarta and Delhi through the decades, you can see that this growth is continuing. Densification, sustained growth, bigger and bigger. And by 2025, we're going to see the emerging cities in Asia taking these top spots. And what we'll find is by 2025, 1/10 of the world's population will live in just 37 cities. So you have to think about what these cities are going to look like. Each of these cities of 10 million or more needs to plan very carefully for this growth. And they need to decouple this growth from unsustainable practices. And we need to protect them because these cities occupy, the ones in green, occupy 34 of the top 100 economies in the world. So they're cities. So I'm going to give you 5 examples of where we're seeing evidence of decoupling in the megacities. The first, which I think you can relate to here in Moscow, is motorization. We are seeing reversing trends in car use globally as GDP increases. It will happen in Moscow. It's unsustainable at the moment, but it will happen. Traffic use will go down using tools such as congestion charging or low emission zones, smarter technologies to improve the way we park our cars and move around. And this will buy valuable time to invest in mass transit solutions. And over the next 20 years, we'll need bigger transport units carrying twice as many people even faster. And here's my solution. That's great. And this is better than London because everyone has a seat. On top of this, we need cleaner vehicles. This is my hybrid solution. And if you just take London, 4,267 people die prematurely every year because of poor air quality in London. This comes through road transport and wasteful energy use. And this is actually the biggest problem that the megacities need to tackle because of the densification, because of the amount of energy use in such a small space. And again, Anton talked about the importance of green roofs. I think this is going to be increasingly important in these cities. And many solutions exist to reduce congestion, improve air quality, and really get people moving faster through the city. Second decoupling is actually, as people get wealthier, they're not demanding more space. It's staying fairly flat. So people are happy with the size of the space they live in, but the quality of their environment, the access to green spaces, is the new driving factor. This is a public space in Germany, people sitting very happily out in the sun. It's -5 degrees, okay? But they're using green space because it's nicely designed, well connected into the environment. This is London. This is with the trees, and then with one of my clever technicians, I took them out. Okay, and you'll be pleased to know I can put them back. But this just shows you that the assets of the city are hugely important for driving the economy, driving people into these places. The third is our energy use in buildings. This goes up as we develop. People demand to use more energy. And but what we're seeing again in megacities, wide-scale retrofits and strategic planning is reversing this trend. And this is our Siemens Centre of Competence in London. This is one of the greenest buildings in the world, reaching some of the very highest of standards. So this is a new build in a new community. The fourth is our ecological footprint. This also increases as we grow, as we develop. But again, new schemes are emerging in the megacities. We're seeing big developments that are reversing this trend as well. Take the same part of East London. This was 20 years ago. And going through time, the scale of development is huge. But rather than develop in traditional ways, there's a new green development path, district heating, local generation, tax incentives for businesses to locate there, and really well connected with green space. And what you do is create these mini cities within the city where people can work and play. And the final decoupling, really, if you just look at CO2 emissions, just broad energy use, and you compare the country with the city, then the cities in every country are doing way, way better. So it's cities that are leading this reversal, this decoupling of these trends and really cleaning up their act. And just referring to Moscow and New Moscow, if you just look at the city centre but put that into the context of the wider territories, you can see that Moscow will overcome and manage to decouple these five with this new bold development, and we can see big things happening here. And finally, just to conclude, if you link these improvements to the way we use our buildings, to the way we consume energy, more reliable energy grids, and with data that we can get for transport, and connect these together, just using technologies that exist today, we can actually really have a higher quality of life in these megacities than we've ever had before. And my final slides, this is Tessa, Jacob and Albert, they're my children, and my chickens, Daphne and Josephine. And I need to update this picture because I've since gained a child and lost a chicken. But this is an experiment to show you what 80 litres of water looks like. Okay? 80 litres is the zero carbon use per person per day for water use, if you're to be deemed low carbon. And if I told you in the United States they use 280 litres per person per day. Even in Europe, we use 220 litres. South America, 180 litres. Even Africa uses 120 litres per person per day. We have to be even better at the way we use our resources, consume our resources, and being aware of the way we use them. This is true for water, waste, energy, any of the resources within our cities. But I feel that the mega cities, the big cities with their new strategic plans are going to get there. That's me. As I said, you can follow me on Twitter, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Some really interesting things to think about, decoupling.
Вот то, как нужно провести это разделение разных.
We separate out the different elements. The use of water, I think. I mean, it's maybe not how much water we use, but what we do to it that's important, and what happened when we finished using it. Anyway, our third keynote this afternoon, Martin. Excuse me, Wolfgang, please.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Yes, I'm pleased to be here, and I'm not giving a try at my Russian, so... But anyway, so it's of course a bit tricky to be the last speaker and to add anything new, because it was quite comprehensive what was said already. But if we look at the sustainable city, I mean, what we see today is basically this. I mean, we built and increased the quality of life in our societies based on a shrinking source of natural, or shrinking base of natural resources. I mean, we live, our ecological footprint is basically globally we consume all the resources that would be available every year in an earlier date. So already now we are totally in overconsumption for this year. We have maybe reached that in August. And I think this appears as much locally as from a global perspective. I mean, we have impacts of climate change already, and I think the forest fires you experienced, I think 2 years ago, I think gave you a bit of a taste what could happen more frequently in the future. So I think we have all reason to basically change that. So, but of course, we don't want to say, okay, we just shrink the quality of life. We need the quality of life even to improve, because I mean that's for citizens today a competitive factor. I mean, we should not be fooled. I mean, cities are in competition also. They are not only partners, they are also competitions for investments, for economy. And if if Moscow claims to be a post-industrial city, then it's all about brains. If you need brains and you attract people with brains, you need a high quality of life. Otherwise, these people move elsewhere where they can find a better life. So the challenge is ultimately to say, how can we produce a higher quality of life with less resources? And this is sort of what all the other presentations were basically alluding to, this kind of decoupling. So it's all about being more resource efficient. So what we want to see is a city that is sort of has a high efficiency in the use of resources, has smart systems in basically providing the services with less, and of course produce ultimately an inclusive society also in social terms. So provide equal services. So what is the vision? I mean, I think Moscow is just on the way to say they have a clear sort of agreed vision. I mean, there is a lot of good ideas and I think a lot of concepts, but what is the vision? I guess in general terms it would be something like that, but that's not necessarily yet a distinctive feature compared to others. So I think you have to translate it in more concrete terms. I mean, what means quality of life? Of course, health, safety, education, jobs, income, access to services, mobility, etc., etc. But these are the key factors for people that they want to see, and they want to, of course, see it close to where they live and not have to go a long ways. So this is all the factors that we have seen: transportation, energy, use of public space, change the housing to higher quality and sort of the living environments, and also basically work on the green infrastructure. So green infrastructure is not, as we said, only about birds and bees. It is also still about birds and bees. So biodiversity plays a role, but it's also using it for keeping your water resources, for clean air supply, and for urban cooling, and so on and so forth, and of course also for recreational purposes. But it has a lot of services to provide to the quality of the urban life. So ultimately, of course, we look to integrate all that into a common plan. However, if we look at the city, it's not like, the mayor is the city or the city government is the city. The city is a large number of actors that have to come together to make such a vision a reality. So the question is also, whose vision is it in the end that's going to be developed? We see, of course, we are experts, so there's a lot of expert input given, but on the other side, of course, we also need the input of the people and stakeholders to make this vision a reality. I think you have to develop a culture of sustainability. I mean, there was a quote of Copenhagen, and you said you're going to work with Jan Gehl, and I think he's quite a proponent of that kind of creating a culture of sustainability and how sort of cities make people and people make cities, sort of this interaction. I think this is quite important to see. So the key factor to make it work is partnership, and partnership with stakeholders, all kinds of, but also with the people, and it has to provide a reliable long-term framework to work together. So of course we also see that the city of tomorrow is not built tomorrow, but it's built today. I mean, we have infrastructure that we imply today lives on for 30, 50 years and is not going to be changed. So whatever you do today will remain for the next 40, 50 years and will be decisive on what and how the city will develop. So basically we have to start today. The challenge that we see is, of course, how we bring the vision back sort of into today's reality. I mean, most of the planning is informed by past experiences, by what we basically know today, but we have to see how we can bring sort of the future goals and the vision translated into what we build today, and how we benchmark the infrastructure that we develop today about sort of against the future needs, and also to bring providers in what is the latest technology available. So we need also a process to say, okay, what are the key goals we want to achieve, and how does that translate into indicators that we can measure and benchmark ourselves. It's not about global benchmarking, it's about benchmarking the city development, about the goals that the city has defined itself for their future development. In order to achieve that, of course, you need to develop a management process. So you have to basically say, okay, where are we today? Where do we want to be in 30 or 40 years? You have to update your targets and planning. You have to implement it, but then you have to monitor and measure it on a regular basis. You know, if you have a report on your development of the key performance indicators every 2 years, it creates transparency and it creates an opportunity to revise and adapt your plans. So therefore, it's not a straight linear way to proceed, but it's a more, a cyclic way upwards, and you have to basically stop when you reach your next floor and look back what you have achieved and look forward, what you can still achieve, what you have to achieve, and how you potentially have to adapt your speed or your pace. So ultimately, it's all about, the governance. So the systems of governance, the systems of planning and monitoring that you really impose or develop in order to basically implement your vision. And I think this is the key factor is, I think we've heard that today, that you have also vertical integration. So, the city beyond its borders, basically also the surrounding region, sort of to make sure that there is a common strategy of development and implementation. And you need also horizontal integration, which means, across the departments. So, there is the environment department, there's actors in transport, there's many other actors that have an impact, and you need to have a mechanism that all these people work basically together for one goal, which is the vision, the implementation of the vision. That's key. So good government is a key, and I think this is confirmed by this quote, which is basically an analysis of a ranking of quality of life of cities around the world, several of them. So you will have 20 cities coming up in different order depending on who's conducted the study. But ultimately, I think this is one of the key results of the analysis. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Wolfgang, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, there are some common themes here. I think the city of tomorrow is built today, very much a truism, the need for integration. The trends that cities face are common, but cities are different. And running through each of your talks, there is the humanity of ecology, that although we seek to decouple use of resources from economic growth, the relationship of ecology to human beings is extremely important. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you doing? Now we have a galactic talent of panelists for you to speak for a moment or two. Please try and keep some of these thoughts in your mind, and I will be ruthless with our panelists so that we can perhaps hear from one or two of you at the end. On the panel, and Pekka, if I may, I will come to you first. We have Pekka Sauri, the Deputy Mayor of Helsinki. Welcome. Anna Kurvasova, Director of the Scientific Institute of Ecology for Russia. Roger Bailey, who led a successful regeneration project in Vancouver for the Winter Olympics there. Very successful and rather relevant here with, although it's a little bit away from Moscow, nonetheless something that's rather relevant for next year. Alina Besembeyeva, you're here, yes, welcome. Deputy Head of Transport and Road Infrastructure for the city of Moscow. A big responsibility, if I may say. And Shinya Mokruslina, formerly of the World Bank, UN Habitat, and our joint curator. Pekka, if I could come to you, please, some comments on what you've heard, and of course from your city, which is a paragon of some of these values that we know so well, and I'm coming in January to say hello, so welcome.
Thank you. And obviously Helsinki will never be a megacity, but perhaps we can offer some solutions also for megacities. One observation from Helsinki is that the use of the private car is on the descendant. Fewer than 50% of the households in the inner city of Helsinki now own a car. I don't own a car. I use public transport, and if I need a car for the family, I book it from a car sharing facility for the weekend. And more urban people regard the car as a nuisance. But obviously that necessitates a good quality public transport, which makes it more tempting than using a private car. And a good example of this trend is that the new master plan for the city of Helsinki is now in the early stages of preparation. And the traffic vision of the master plan prioritizes walking, biking, public transport, and finally, cars. And one of the more ambitious plans connected to this is to reclaim land from the motorways leading into and out of the inner city that were built in the 60s and the 70s. These will be changed into city boulevards, vacating hectares of land for housing projects or green spaces, if it so may be. And another program which may be worth consideration in bigger cities is district heating and cooling linked to waste management. More than 90% of all heated space in the city of Helsinki is connected to district heating, and we're now busy building a district cooling network. And the heat and cooling is produced in a cogeneration process where energy and heat are generated together, highly energy efficient. And on top of this, we are now completing a waste management system where all household waste is sorted at the source. Every apartment building has a recycling room where households bring their sorted waste, bio-waste, paper, cardboard, brown cardboard, glass, tins. And what's left is mostly plastic packaging, which will from next year be burned in a waste power plant, from which the heat is again fed into the district heating network. Quite elegant, I think, and you're all welcome to have a look. But finally, a more general point about cities. It is becoming increasingly evident that cities are growing stronger and nation states are getting weaker. More and more of the decisions which have the greatest impact on the future of civilization and the planet are made in cities. And this, in my view, makes it necessary for more power to be shifted to local governments, which in the end have the knowledge and the social networks to make these decisions. Thank you.
Pekka, thank you so much for squeezing so much into such a short time. Fantastic. And I hope our colleagues here can come perhaps to see Winning Space, Putting Trees Back, music to my ears. Thank you so much. Anna, do you have something you would like to say? Anna?
Наш институт уже
For more than 20 years, our institute has been researching the ecological issues here in Moscow, and today we clearly see this shift from the so-called nature protection policy towards efficient use of natural resources. We had our cooperation with different other departments, initiating different laws and rules, and today as we analyze our experience of implementing such documents into the work of the government and government structures, let me say this: Moscow today is a unique metropolis compared with other cities that also run stably. Moscow can now cross these old borders by this administrative decree. That's a huge responsibility, a lot of opportunities, because this new policy is the tool that should help all of us not to continue the old negative trends, the consequences of which we understand. And finally, we have this chance, maybe we are the only metropolis in the world with this chance to become a really ecological smart city metropolis. And today, within the framework of this new policy, we should have this new paradigm as it comes to assessing the quality of our city planning solutions. If in the previous 20 years Moscow has been developing its policy based on the principles this is allowed, this is not, and there were some pieces of land where nature protection was used and others were taboo. Today, as our economy is now called post-industrial, and since we touched more and more by processes of globalization, we have to tackle not only this allowed, not allowed issue, but also this good or bad issue. And this is the core question that this is the core thing that should attract or people to certain areas or turn them away from them in the city. That's number one. Number two, to deal with this issue, we need to understand how we develop new territories as we look at our economic abilities. Martin Powell, tomorrow we're going to meet and discuss the technological solutions that could be used to develop territories that are today lacking infrastructural and engineering, transport and engineering infrastructure, how to make this autonomous. And as we spread people to new territories that we get, and the old territories, our resources are limited, those same limits of growth that the whole world is talking about. And Moscow now, today, finally has to show how that can be used. Thus, these new technologies and this new economic policy is what we really need and what we need to use as the resource of our development. Finally, most importantly, what are the real limits? Considering the taiga that you mentioned, if we use the ecosystem approach, how far can Moscow spread and remaining as a comfortable city? The Lord, or was it the Lord or Prince Yuri, long-armed, put our capital in these very climatic positions, and we cannot demand more than we have from the point of view of natural and ecological limitations for our development. Also, the transportation and engineering framework, as we believe, should be developing on the basis of identified ecological framework. In other words, those natural ecosystems that we, of course, we lost them on the territory of the old Moscow, but as we get this new Moscow, we will have to use all our abilities to really preserve it and make it an organic framework for the development. As we develop the new norms for city planning and the new master plan of Moscow, our institute, and we are the subcontractor of Moscow Architectural Committee, we are developing the social norms to develop natural and planted territories. I'm not going to take too much of your time, but this topic for thinking today, this regulatory framework, should become our topic number one in terms of what the authorities should care about. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Came to Moscow. I was working on a project that is now in Novi Moscow. And I was trying to save a stand of trees because we had to take these trees away. And I was saying, no, we must keep these trees. Really, they're so important, part of the forest. And one of my Russian colleagues said, Brian, have you any idea how many trees there are between here and Vladivostok? And my answer was, not enough. Thank you very much. Roger, from Vancouver, from that other area of the world that has extremes of climate and huge areas of natural forest, do you have some observations for us?
Well, I'm lucky that Vancouver doesn't have the extremes of climate that we have here in Moscow. I think the interesting thing in Vancouver is that the municipalities that make up the greater Vancouver area have really gone through an extensive planning process, and they put in place a long-range strategic sustainability plan that's really the driving vision for how each of those municipalities is being developed. And it's really interesting to read it and see just how much focus has been placed on sustainable development, on carbon-related issues, on global responsibility, and on the fundamental issue of comfort and quality of life. each of the municipalities has then taken that framework and built within it a strategic plan for the implementation of that major overall planning program. The City of Vancouver has put together their 2020 Greenest City in the World plan. I think it's a little ambitious. There are others who are spending a lot more money on green initiatives than we are, but certainly there is a cultural sense in the whole of Vancouver about the environment, the quality of life, and each decision that's made is really supported by extensive public consultation and participation from the citizens who really are driving this direction. And I think I think 3 years in a row we've been deemed one of the most livable cities in the world. Lost it to Melbourne, I think, last year, but it really has made a huge difference. I wanted to comment just on one issue. We spend a lot of time in the various industries looking for how do we change consumption and conserve energy. It's very, very simple. If you pay for what you use, you will probably save about 30% of the energy that you normally use. I'm now working in that area of implementing metering technology in residential buildings, and I can absolutely guarantee you that it is the single best decision that you can make in terms of conserving energy. Just let people pay for what they consume. It makes an incredible difference. So it's really, for us, a collaborative vision. It's built around the human spirit. It's built around quality of life. It's built around the family. It's built around, passion and working together as a community. And we have a very diverse community in Vancouver. We've got vast number of cultures that have all come together and actually have functioned very successfully. And I actually feel immensely proud of that part of what we've achieved, and that we can bring people together and have them function effectively, and at the same time respect the environment and the neighbors that are in other parts of the globe. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. I think we can learn a lot from cities who can bring their citizens to a position that they understand that they need to pay for what they use.
Yes.
So I think building that consensus is back to governance, and it's quite important. Could you switch off your mic? Thank you very much. Alina, would you like to say something from your perspective of the space between buildings, as some of us call roads?
Да, спасибо большое. Добрый день всем еще раз.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So transport influences directly on the city environment, and in Moscow there is more than 1 million tons of hazardous emissions are observed. 93% from them as just pollution from our individual cars, and the Department of Transport very often look to this problem in terms of heavy traffic, that we should avoid them and prevent them, and we do a lot of measurements and we do a lot of research on this. And Maxim spoke not once about the situation without transport. More than only about 2 million private cars can be seen in Moscow streets every day, and we counted them and we researched the situation. So if at least 500,000 cars won't be seen in our streets, we will avoid heavy traffic, and the city will be more movable, and certainly this has an impact on the environment. And I would like to repeat that the main emissions of hazardous compounds are from our transport. So also implement a lot of practical actions to help the city. And first of all, we understand that the most important thing is to develop municipal transport. I would agree with my colleagues who spoke before that a lot can be done, but we should still develop and enhance the municipal transport. And we need to persuade people to use municipal transport and to shift from an individual car to our municipal transport. And certainly we need to raise the quality of that. We need to make it more attractive, and we need to make them more comfortable for people. So, and a lot should be done in this direction. We have a huge program to achieve such goals. So, well, I won't elaborate on that. So, if you are interested, then I will happy to take your questions after that. But we also develop, bicycle traffic around the city. So sometimes we are called the Department of Bicycles. So certainly we have a lot of areas of our activities, but we think that bicycles, should be developed in the city. So we are criticized a lot and saying that a bicycle is not for Moscow, and because the climate is absolutely wrong for this traffic. But we researched this issue and we visited a lot of other cities. We travel quite a lot, and we see that bicycles in other cities in comparable climatic conditions still is very popular even in the winter. So we don't have enough infrastructure. We need to enhance it, and we do a lot here. So maybe our foreign colleagues noticed already that we hadn't got enough just routes for bicycles, special pathways, but we already we even implemented some rented bicycle system in Moscow, and Moscow showed quite high indicators in terms of that. So about 50 rented bicycle points were open in Moscow this summer, but more than 18,000 people used bicycles, and so we are planning to introduce more than 5,000 bicycles to be rented in the streets of Moscow and to increase the number of rented bicycle points. So we'll also enhance the bicycle road map in the city, and we hope that quite a lot of people will be attracted by this, not just as an enjoyment, but as their last resort in moving around the city. And we also do a lot with our colleagues from the environmental department aimed at the development of the cargo transport logistics and truck logistics. So we are planning also to implement that what we call our cargo backbone of the city. I would like to explain what it means. So in many cities of the world, trucks have a special framework, a special map of roads that are just designated only for trucks and lorries, and we help to develop this activity. So there are certainly some unpopular actions in place, and we are a lot criticized regarding that. First of all, these are parking lots, whereas parkomats, and so this action was not popular, but it's necessary, and without them the city would become really unattractive and people start living at. So we talked about the vice mayor of Milano who told us about the paid entrance to the city and paid parking lots. So the community just opposed the situation quite a lot, and for a long time they tried to explain that Milano was one of the dirtiest cities of Europe in terms of the environment. First of all, it was related to the motorization of the city, and people understood this and just somehow just accepted the situation with this unpopular action that they had to undertake. So we do a lot of practical practical actions. We try to implement some measures to reduce the number of the cars, to improve the environment, to raise the quality of lifestyle of people, and we are seeking for your support on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alina. I think Moscow there is a huge place in my heart for Moscow. Western cities have lived with the motor car for 50, 60, 100 years, and for you, car ownership has been an explosion in the last 20 years, and just as soon as you have all of these cars, you now need to decide you got to get rid of them all, and people from other countries come along and say, oh, you have to take all of these cars away. So it's really a fantastic compliment, I think, to Moscow and to Mayor Sobyanin, who wants to get ahead of the curve. And you talk about these new policies. I think it's quite fantastic. I'm just going to ask our last panelist, but just before I do, ladies and gentlemen, I think from the organizers, I know that we don't have to finish exactly on past, because we started a little bit late and the program is running a little bit late. So we're going to have some minutes for discussion. So can I ask you to think about your questions? We have two young people with microphones. So I'm told. Yes, look, there's a young lady with a microphone, two of them. So we'll get some questions to get our panelists. But to move into that, great pleasure to ask Xenia to maybe help the old moderator try and frame some of these things, a couple of reflections for the discussion. Xenia, please.
Спасибо большое, Брайан.
Thank you very much, Brian. I try to be very brief, partly for more time for Q&A session, and I guess that's what we need to hear today, is that the approach to the urban environment shouldn't be just a philosophical or based on morality, but it should be very pragmatic. Urban environment is a comfort for us, it's a driver for our social and economic development, and urban ecology should be profitable, and it needs to be profitable, and we need to make money on it, and we need to communicate that to the private sector, to business, and we need to create certain conditions for that, which are being created using special measures of the municipal policy in terms of the environment. It is not just of prohibiting character; it is also based on the chemical, on the economical and financial incentives. So the city environment should become a standard, should become a norm for everyone, and shouldn't be something extraordinary. The urban economy should be kind of a business as usual concept based, and the urban ecology also should be an interdisciplinary object in the discussion of the development of the municipal policy. So we're just starting talking about environmental aspects and transport policy. We still miss a little bit the building strategy in terms of the environment and land use and the city design and the architectural forms and public spaces and pedestrian spaces. So we're missing an opportunity to shape their disciplinary approach to the development of the urban environment and ecology. So I'm very happy that these words have been voiced in the new environmental policy of the city, and I hope that this approach will be more verbal, more understandable for everybody. And this leads me to the idea that the urban environment is first of all the issue of management. It also relates to the building of a dialogue, of partnerships, quite extensive partnerships, not just the cooperation between municipal departments, but also the cooperation with the business, with the communities, and with the actors of the environmental market, suppliers of environmental services and goods, and other market actors which behave in an environmentally friendly way and certainly distinguish themselves among these non-conscientiousness actors, and we should support them. The ecology shouldn't be a kind of a limitation for the activities of other departments. It also should become a long-term vision, common vision, which was mentioned by Wolfgang, and I hope that we'll see this in Moscow. And just the last thing I would like to say, that we should somehow move from a paradigm of the environmental protection, which for me seems maybe sounds a little bit as a limitation. We should switch over to the environmental development paradigm, which happens together with the economic development and social development. And here it is important to single out a concept which was presented by Martin, the coupling concept where the environment, where the economic growth is not in conflict with the environmental protection. It's actually built on the environmental development. Thank you.
Cues in now, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours. Yes. Oh, great. Hands. I mean, I see a lot of Russian people in the audience, and I always think you're always ready. So there is a gentleman at the back, there's a lady at the front. And perhaps could I ask for a couple of questions, first of all? So rather than taking each question one at a time, I think if we can hear from this gentleman, this lady, and the gentleman over there, and then we'll gather them together. Oh, and this gentleman here. So let's take 2 or 3 points, sir, please.
Работает. Здравствуйте. Вопрос.
Готовить ответы. So the question to Anton, head of the department. So you mentioned a very interesting fact that in New York a green bank was set up based on green technologies and which comprises $1 billion. So we also clarified that we also would like to have kind of a tool here in Moscow. And there is a question, if tomorrow an investor approaches you and says, here is $50 million for you for the project on the green technology development in Moscow. So as head of the department, are you ready to follow this way and say, okay, I will also invest another $50 million for that?
Thank you very much. And Anton, while you can think of the answer, we will gather some more questions. I'm sure the answer is yes. This lady here in the front. Can I just ask, while this lady is getting the microphone, is the question this gentleman has raised, if you're a Muscovite, show your hands. Are you concerned about this as well? Looks like you're on your own, sir. Yes, madam.
Well, thank you very much for a chance to put a question. So this is a question to Alina. What could be a mechanism of the interaction between the government and the community in terms of transportation policy and the participation of the community in the planning of traffic in Moscow? Thank you.
Yes, but we'll take one more. So there's something about the Green Bank, there's something about government policy and community. Behind you, sir. Behind you.
Петр Кирюшин, Центр биоэкономики и инноваций.
So I represent the economic faculty of the Center of Innovation. So we talk here about cities. Well, but we are missing people. So the environmental aspect of all this suggests the participation and involvement of people, and this is quite a value. And this value can be introduced through the universities. A concept of green universities and green schools has been developed abroad. And here in this city, this initiative on behalf of the universities is looked at just as a fun. And our Department of Economy, we think that here is a great potential for the development of business model as regards the energy efficiency, environmental education, and so on and so forth. There's first of all the development of universities as a research issue and development of innovations. So what do you think? What is the potential of such environmental or green universities and schools for the promotion of the green economy issue in this country? I agree with the previous speaker that we need to start the era of environmental development.
Thank you very much. So a question about developing a green economy or sustainable, maybe, not just greenwash, but thank you very much. Yes, sir, and then we'll...
Здравствуйте.
Vasily Grebyanikov.
Great presentation, very condensed. And can you say what you think about the trade-offs between district heating and distributed generation? You know, like in Scandinavia, you have a very extensive district heating system, same as we have here in Russia. And now there is a lot of talks about distributed generation, about smart grids and stuff like that. What are your considerations about that? It's kind of big scale question. And could you give any tips how you handle cycling in the winter?
Yeah.
between cycle lanes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Perhaps rather than asking one of our speakers to answer the question, I think the value of the forum is that we have so many Russian experts here from Moscow, from the city, from state institutions, and we have them here at the table with international experts. So I think, of course, Anton, please answer the question about the Green Bank, and Alina say something about transport policy. But I would like to hear also from one or two of our international experts on these things too. Let's deal with the Green Bank thing, and perhaps relate that also to the Green University and thinking, green thinking, changing in thinking. Anton.
Такой вопрос глобальный, наверное,
It's a question of global nature. Let me try and start with the Green Bank. Somebody offered me if I would be able to invest, or the city would be able to invest $50 million. And we have such co-financing projects, budget money together with the investors' money. They exist quite all right, coexist quite all right for the interests of the city. And there are a lot of examples like that we have hundreds of them in the last 3 years that we had, that were all examples of co-financing. So it's quite an option. If somebody invests 50 million, the city could invest 50, 60, 70, 100 million. If you have a project, let's meet and discuss it next week. As for green thinking, to me, it's a deep philosophical question to me. Of course, green thinking is important, and for the residents of big cities, we need to become less selfish, but comfort brings about selfishness, which is hard to get rid of. That's why we get all these social protests against limitations and things like that. In Moscow, we call them experiments, because if you say to residents, tomorrow something is going to be limited, like car owners are going to be rioting. And when people stay in traffic jams, they hear about some initiatives, begin to unite to counteract that. But in ourselves, we should find those reasons to abandon some comfort for the sake of, I guess, future generations.
Would somebody like Perka, would you like to say something, or Wolfgang, or Roger, or some comment from the international perspective to pick up on what Anton has said? Well, in the first instance, on the Green Bank and the green thinking, because then I will ask Alina to say something about the transport policy.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think a good thing is to say if you have something like a green bank, you know, I think that the question is whether you invest the money directly or you create sort of a revolving fund. So that means that some money can also flow back, so that you give people money for investment. But if you have a good business case to also basically get some income from what you do, I mean, be it energy efficiency, where you can have sort of with contracting scheme, you can have a refund, you know, for many also in terms of sometimes the real estate development and you know, even green space, if you can sort of, you know, use the money several times before it's basically spent, and not only for one investment. I think this is what a lot of also schemes within the European Union do. So I mean, I think this is one thought. I think the green thinking, I think I would like to come back to this vision. I think if you have an agreed vision where the city wants to go, and which is carried not only by experts and the government, but also carried by the people, I think, you know, it's easier to translate. You will still have to work on the acceptance, but also if you look in an issue like transport, if you talk to the people, you know, in their own constituency, I mean, everybody would agree to you know, safety issues, to clean air issues, to you know, reduce traffic with their own area. If you build it from bottom up, you know, I think it's easier for them to accept of course, I mean, there's always this transition. You have to start somewhere, and whenever you reduce something, never the perfect alternative will be right there. But if you have this perspective that within years, you build it up, and as much as you sort of, potentially reduce, you offer the alternatives and build that up in parallel. I think it will work. I mean, but the key issue is to communicate this perspective for people, where you want to go and where they will profit in the long term, and that will change the thing. That's a lot of also educational work you have to do in terms of your communication. I mean, it's not only basically saying we do that, but it's educating people in a way.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. Pekka.
To pick up on what Wolfgang just said, strategy is everything. You have a city strategy, it's here, and you can't have a green strategy like parallel to that. It's got to be built in the city strategy, and if it's not there, it's nowhere. The city can only have one strategy, and not the real strategy and an alternative green strategy. It will come to nothing. And this, I think, is the highest priority, which is, and I think many cities have sort of grown into this by having sort of the real strategy and then sort of shadow strategies. But you can only have one. And once you build in the sustainability strategy into the city strategy, you're there. And after that, it's implementation and operationalization.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's nice catchy phrase, that strategy is everything, and I think that's a very strong point. And let's think about these two comments here as we ask Alina to talk a little bit about the relationship of government and community and mechanisms for communication in transport, and then maybe Martin might like to say something.
Let me make a couple of comments about what my colleagues have said. I agree that a strategy is important, and of course our city does have a transport strategy that we are implementing, but besides the strategy, we also should have the quality of implementation. And for us, one of the cornerstones is the quality of implementation. Sometimes you can have a great strategy, but it's in the desk drawer and it's not implemented. And we need some specific steps that you can really implement that. In terms of communication, hey, I agree with my colleague. In my opinion, the government of Moscow, and I'm a relatively new person there, and before that, for 15 years, I worked in commercial companies, and I know very well what a strategy is and how you have implementation plan and communication. And to me, it was quite surprising that they really do a lot in the Moscow government. Not a lot of good things, but not all of that is communicated right. And so we had a question from the audience about the communication, how it's important, how today this is done. Perhaps we need to make it even more systemic. And okay, now we have a lot of sources and opportunities that one can use to get in touch with the government. For example, people use the public web portal mos.ru, where people write their wishes and share their ideas, and there are definite timelines, deadlines for when they should get a response, and they are strictly followed. Another thing, we try to work with different NGOs, public organizations. As for bicycleization story, so to speak, before approving that 2014 plan and rent a bike program, we had a lot of meetings and discussions with different bicycle-loving communities, and we were shown certain consequences of what we planned. Anyway, we used that systemic approach, so we had a lot of discussion, a workshop with cyclists, and eventually we came to some common denominator. Now, this idea about walking zones, and we discuss them a lot, and we are quite open for dialogue, and we regularly meet with shop owners that are located in pedestrian zones, and are trying to find some a compromise, and now we try to meet citizens who live in pedestrian zones. So on the one hand, we want to make them open for local residents, for pedestrians, but on the other hand, people who live there want their chance to approach their building, their residential building in a car, because they may have kids and so on. Regularly, we meet with residents of different city districts twice every quarter, and Maxim Leksotov, the head of the department, and we do that. And in my opinion, our structure, the Department of Transport, is quite open for communication. We may not have learned to actively communicate to the outside world why we do what we do and so on, but we are learning, and I hope in the nearest future we'll get there. We understand the importance of that, and we are open to your opinions. Again, there are many ways to get in touch with us, and if you have any other ideas, do inform us. We will support them if they are worthy.
Alina, Moscow open city. I like the concept. Martin.
Just to add a little bit on the transport question, I think Alina probably has the toughest job in Russia, well, in Moscow anyway, because when you play around with the way people want to travel, you upset more people than you make happy. And so nothing you do is popular, and there is no one single solution. So congestion charging or low emission zones or consolidation schemes for logistic traffic are all, they're all single things that you can do that contribute to this improvement. Parking schemes as well. And then, the bike schemes, moving people onto buses or moving people onto trams, you simply have to make these alternatives more attractive. And it's very difficult to do, because people, if they want to drive, they'll drive. And who are we to change that? So I commend you for your efforts, but people probably don't thank you enough.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I've probably kept you long enough from your tea and coffee. I need to move to wrap things up. But we've got one last topic, and I just want to go around the table. I'll start with Roger. If you've got something to say on this, briefly, dear friend, and then any tips about district heating and distributed smart grids. In a sentence, round the table, starting with you.
I was actually going to focus on district energy, and it's an interesting question because the Vancouver municipalities kind of visited Northern Europe, and they drank the Kool-Aid, and they all came back and told us we need district energy, and now we have all sorts of municipalities building district energy. And that's actually ending up costing the consumer way more than you could do energy delivery in a way more efficient manner using localized building systems. So it's a kind of strange thing that's gone on in Vancouver around district energy. And I have to say, I'm the single soldier working against district energy in order to look for more efficient and effective building-related solutions.
Okay, thank you. Pekka, you want to say anything, Wolfgang, about this distributed grids, or Martin? Quickly. Thank you. No? Please.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on about the smart grids, but I won't. But the winter biking, how do we manage winter biking? The answer is with difficulty. And winter bikers are the most sort of, let's say, sharp critics of the city administration, and I'm responsible for that, and I get all the flack. But we try to sort of clear the main bike routes by 7 o'clock in the morning after a blizzard. Sometimes we manage it, sometimes we won't, but it is a priority.
Okay, Wolfgang, Martin, last word.
I think about the distributed generation issue versus district heating. I think that the question is the infrastructure cost and how the size of the development that you can basically link to it. I think. I mean, of course, if you're only into sort of refurbishment or one or two buildings, I mean, it doesn't make sense to link it up, and because the infrastructure investment is too high. If you have a well developed heating grid already. I think you can also, I mean, the question is then with the smart technology how you link up the distributed generation to the grid in order to basically manage the volatility in the system. That's the challenge about this whole smart grid discussion. So, but I think it's not one solution fits all thing. I mean, I think you have to carefully evaluate for each case what is sort of the real most beneficial situation. I think we are today fortunately in the situation that we have good technologies for both options in order to make them economically viable depending on the framework conditions.
Thank you. Last word, Martin.
Smart grids are about reliability and they make renewable energy schemes work. The simple answer is if you have one, you will attract more businesses, which is economically good, and you'll have cleaner air to breathe, which is not just good for my kids, but everyone else's. So.
Thank you very much indeed. I need to wrap up. I think we've had fantastic contributions from our speakers and panelists this afternoon. Anton, bravo. You've talked about the human ecology and you've linked ecology to livability. It's fantastic. You also talked about short-term and long-term thinking. We need to be able to balance these two. And the common thing I heard from you, and indeed from Anna as well, from our Russian colleagues, is that ecology is not just a good thing. We need to get beyond that. We get beyond protection, and we get to design, and we get to working with things. And I really compliment you for that. I think it's fantastic. From Martin, well, we heard about the common trends. But all cities are different, so it's necessary to think about things in that way. You need to design something that is specifically for Moscow, and one size will not fit all. You need to temper, but we need to decouple use of resources from economic growth, and he gave us a number of elements that we might think about in that respect. Once again, Wolfgang talked about quality of life and that the city of tomorrow is built today. And of course, what we do today, we do for our children and for our grandchildren. He made a plea for integration, perhaps of everyone, vertical and horizontal. The management processes are extremely important. From Pekka, with characteristic directness from that part of the world, strategy is everything, and you're so right. And we must complement Moscow. I think about the way that the city is moving towards a common trajectory and a shared vision under the leadership of Mayor Sobyanin. Anna, new policies, and my compliments. It's just fantastic. Roger, of course, talked on the cultural aspects of these as much as, which is something we would all say. So I thought it was just fantastic that the panelists brought these other dimensions into it, and the consensus that links back to what others were saying around stand up for our responsibilities. It can be really something quite important. And Alina, bringing business thinking to the transportation system in Moscow, to the cycling department for cycling as much as department for roads. Bravo! The space between buildings is after my heart. And Xenia for coming back and recounting these things. I'm going to ask you if you would please thank them. But before I do, if I can just leave you with one interesting thought. You know, my American colleagues are always talking about the fact that they have to work until about May before they stop paying their taxes and they start working for themselves. And we heard from our German colleague that by about August, we have finished working for ourselves and we're living beyond our means. So it means that there's a little bit of time in the middle of the year between May and September when we start paying the government our taxes. We can live for ourselves, but after that, and as we head towards Christmas, we're living beyond our means. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for a wonderful session. Please thank the speakers in the normal way. Thank you very much.